Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my interviews. I'm out and about doing a walk and talk. As you know, society is very much broken. And one of the areas that I've been talking to a lot of the sovereign people and people who are concerned about law and lawfulness is, of course, our prisons. I very much enjoyed my conversations with Clive Freeman. You may have heard him on the channel. We haven't been able to see him for ridiculous reasons. And he's the gentleman who's been put in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. It is a case of, I've forgotten the term. Miscarriage of justice. And I want to introduce you to another gentleman who has had a similar but completely different case, miscarriage of justice. And it just goes to show how the law system as it stands is really not fit for purpose. So it's my pleasure to meet up with Sean Parker. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Richard.
And every now and again I just need to make sure that I can see the little preview window. Now, the lovely Julia often films these interviews, but she was not available today, so forgive me for holding the camera. So, Sean, you've got a very interesting case because what happened to you could happen to anybody. And it's very much of the almost of the Me Too sort of situation that's come up, and it obviously now it goes to show how warped the system is. So I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, and we had a little brief chat about this, about how much you can say about your case. If you would just give us a little rundown of what happened to you.
Yes, certainly. In 2016, I was helping to run an arts centre here on the Sussex coast, not in this town, and it was very successful. But in the Christmas of that year, the December, I was accused of sexual assault. Right at the time when Harvey Weinstein was being arrested in New York.
Oh, right.
Full of everybody's television, all the rest of it.
Yes. So that was the birth of this Me Too movement, wasn't it?
That was the birth of Me Too, in the sense that, I mean, it had been going as a hashtag for years before that, but it became very bubbly because of a lot of cash chucked their way after the Title IX sort of directive coming out of America, which was Joe Biden basically weaponising college campus rape accusations just to make them all happen.
Oh, right.
A very simplistic way of putting it.
Yes.
But they chuck money at it, and all those young students their futures are destroyed.
Yes. Oh, that's awful.
So, yeah, I was arrested in that 2016, and then I was on bail for another 14 months after that.
So sexual assault obviously is a very bad thing, and so a lot of people will think, well, you know, if it's sexual assault, maybe you ought to have gone to prison and things like that. However, if you didn't do it, then it must be a difficult thing to prove it because you've got he says, she says.
Right. Used to be he said, she said, but since 2010-ish, it's been to believe the victim.
Just like a blanket thing.
That has been the enacting of it. I mean, that's not in law. It's a directive introduced by Keir Starmer, amongst others.
So it's a policy, not legislation.
Yeah, exactly. They've introduced loads of things by policy, because you don't really have to have the law as pat if you have various ways of doing things. So basically, it's a trial by allegation, basically.
Right.
This is what my defence said, and it's what I said. I mean, it's a one-night stand. I don't want to belittle anything or anyone.
Well, people have one-night stands all the time.
Yes.
And one assumes that when you have a one-night stand, you're both consenting to whatever happens, unless, of course, there's an obvious no, I don't want this from either person. So presumably that wasn't the case in yours.
Well, that's the case that that wasn't happening. We were both drunk, consensually drunk, and that's what my defence said, and their prosecution said she just submitted to sex, and so they went to 2 and 4 on this, but there was no evidence of anything, except some CCTV, which was us getting close, and there was nothing to do with the event, which was upstairs.
Presumably, if you're likely to be having consensual sex, you are presumably just as likely to be getting close in those hours before such a thing happens.
Well, that's exactly it, yeah.
I mean, if you didn't, you know, and you just barged in and you were having sex with somebody against their will, then it seems a much more stated case that something rather nefarious happened. But if there's this sort of gentle build up to it, it seems most probable to me that you were both sort of, you know, you're adults presumably, and you're
yes.
and you know the game and you know what's about to happen.
Well,
in theory,
absolutely. You got it right, and we were friends.
Yes.
And the people that reported it was the boyfriends, so it wasn't even them themselves.
We'll nip through. Oh no, we'll nip through the next one.
So the whole plot thickens, and that's how you can manipulate the believe the victims policy.
Right.
We've come around to calling it believe the allegation, because believe the victims has been so tortured by various activists.
Yes.
We've decided, Dr. Norton and I, are going with believe the allegation.
So what happens after that? So you were taken to court for this sexual assault, and you go through that whole process, and you're trying to defend yourself. But from our private conversation beforehand, it sounds like even though you've got, well, what evidence you can provide, at the end of the day, it's the courts are still in favour of the victim. Is that right?
They don't pretend that that's the case.
Right. Okay.
But the jury was kind of 9 women and to 3 men.
Yes.
And there wasn't any hard evidence except for this CCTV, and the witness that I had decided to not speak, and I didn't speak for myself because of my stammer.
Right.
Which back then was much worse than it is right now with you. So all these things combined together, and Harvey Weinstein, to take me down. This is my defence. Anyway.
Yes. No. And you know, you don't have to defend yourself here.
No.
I think it must be very difficult for men who are put into this position, because, I mean, even people watching this may well say, oh, well, we'll nip round here because we'll just avoid the children. It's not good to film children, obviously.
Quite.
But people, you know, I think the society that we've got into is so skewed at the moment that it's very difficult now to see men as innocent of anything, particularly if you happen to be the colour that we are. But, you know, there seems to be a woke agenda. Now, I'm not playing down, of course, that sexual assault, rape or whatever is not happening, or that people aren't getting away with it. But when you're the innocent party and you're the person that you've, you know, presumably had a nice evening and thought no more about it at the end of it, suddenly turns around and says, well, actually, something else happened, it puts you in a very difficult situation.
Well, it's life-changing. So, yeah, it's very difficult indeed.
So you were convicted at the end of this
Yep.
for a crime that you didn't commit, and what happened then?
So I was then sent to prison for 4.5 years, because you do get out halfway through, which is a very good thing for rehabilitation of the guilty.
Right.
And the innocent, for that matter.
Yes.
So I went to reception prison for 2 months, as one does, and I was doubled up. And then I went to Dartmoor for 2.5 years.
So when you say you're doubled up, you mean with somebody else with you?
Yes, that's right.
Now, I've never been to prison, and I hope I never go to prison, although, you know, I dare say people are watching my output and thinking, we'll be slamming him up somewhere. So this is a very naive question, of course, but what's it like?
Shit. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Put it as it is.
Sorry.
No. We'll go and have a little sit down over there, I think.
Okay.
Shit. So can you explain a bit more? I mean, obviously you've gone from being a free man, doing your own thing, your life suddenly changes, and so what does that mean?
The way that I handled it, being a person not expecting or used to criminal behaviours or circumstances,
Yeah.
I just handled it by, so I sit,
Yeah, let's sit here.
by seeing it as from outside, so just kind of commenting on it as a writer and an artist, and becoming kind of an expert in the law, I suppose, and the cultural politics that go behind this kind of thing.
Yes, because you've got everything to gain because you didn't do it, and they put you in this position. I mean, you're presumably put in with all sorts of other people who have all sorts of other issues that go with them, which must be very challenging.
Very much so. I'm a people person at my best, like you. I'm a journalist who used to be a journalist, and I became a Samaritan's listener in there to try to get something helpful out of the time.
Right.
So I trained to be one for 6 months, and then was one for 6 months. So, and you get to meet in the course of that everybody in an integrated prison. So everybody who's done everything is in there.
Gosh.
From very serious, but they usually come into the end of their sentences. So whatever happened 40 years ago.
Yes.
So quite a lot of old blokes. There's a lot of elderly in prison, and you would help them through their individual issues as best you can as a Samaritan, which is by not advising anything, just listening. So I'm a good listener. I like people's stories. I'm a people person,
yes.
And everyone would turn around to me and say, "You shouldn't be in here. It's not for you." I'm like, "Oh, I'm glad you noticed that."
Yes.
But there's a lot of them there's 15,000 people kind of for maintaining innocence to some degree in prison.
Is there really?
At any given time, it's a very rough figure, but
yes.
Safari, the support for falsely accused reference people, worked out by their various stats that it's about 15,000.
Gosh, at any one time. That's an incredible amount of people who've been failed by the system.
Yeah.
And so, and you said you went to what did you call it? Introductory prison.
The first one was a reception.
Reception, yes. Sorry about my vague terms here. I'm not a journalist, just a YouTuber trying to weave my way through all of these things. Then what happens to you after the reception?
Right, so you're in the reception prison, like somewhere like Brixton or Winchester or Bristol.
Yes.
Like an old Victorian place.
And presumably everybody else in there is also in the reception mode.
Yeah, you're all going to be sentenced, or you're going somewhere else, or you're on remand. There's
right.
a lot of remand prisoners, which is disgraceful. It's like they're sticking people away without convicting them.
Right, so they must be very angry. Angry,
confused, suicidal sometimes. I don't like to weaponise that word too much, but they are really, really low.
Gosh.
Yeah.
And so after a couple of months, you'll then move to somewhere where they're allocating what to do with you, I suppose. Yes,
your case is being processed in some office, and they've decided, right, Parker's going to Dartmoor.
Right. So, and that's where you went.
Off you go in a meat wagon inside, and in your sweatshirt and your pumps.
Gosh.
And you quite quickly get to gravitate. The best thing about the whole process was to gravitate towards other people in a similar boat.
Yes.
As in ex-bosses and teachers and people like that who've somehow their employees or their surroundings have got upset with them, and they've sued them for something, and it's all gone wrong. There's people who spent like £1 million on their defence, and I didn't do that because I didn't have £1 million, but lots of my pals did. So the stories they have are much worse than mine.
Right. Gosh. I mean, and this is what the public don't know about generally, unless you have a friend or a colleague or somebody has gone through this. You're totally ignorant of the facts and of course what goes on the inside. So did you spend 4 years at Dartmoor?
No, it was 2.5 years there.
Which is very remote, isn't it? I mean, I've been to Dartmoor and I've seen the prison, and there's a little museum, and you can go to the museum and you can see how it used to be, and there's these warders dressed up in the old Victorian outfits.
Yeah.
Probably obviously a bit different.
Well, it's a very historical place, and so the historian in me was going, right, you're in a very historical place, try and enjoy that.
Yes.
And when we got to go outside, which is now and again, not very often, you're able to see the granite blocks and the moors outside the prison, and it is very stunningly kind of Bronte country.
Oh right,
it's all that wuthering
heathland and open and desolate.
Desolate, and I was brought up in Devon, in Exeter, so there's a sense of going home,
right,
but under rather different circumstances than expected.
Not the circumstances you would have wanted, of course.
Right.
So a little bit of time there, and then somewhere else.
Halfway through that in January 2020, the COVID hit.
Right.
So we were all banged up for 23 hours a day for a couple of months.
23 hours a day.
Yeah, it's awful. Though
on your own, or doubled up.
The good thing about Dartmoor is that everyone has their own cell. When I was there,
right. Oh, thank God for that. If you didn't get on with the person you're with, it would. I mean, it's bad enough as it is.
Yeah. There's all kinds of horror stories that didn't afflict me in that sense.
Yes.
They shipped some of us off to decent. There's a thing that's misunderstood about it somewhat, is that being actually in your cell,
yes.
When you get to open prison, it's your room, but in this prison cell, is that it's actually a safe space in the sense of it's yours. I'm not going to say comfortable to irritate your viewers, but you've made it your own space.
Right,
you
own world.
Kind of curtains and rugs everywhere. It's not like that.
No,
it's grim but it's your own world. You're allowed your couple of chocolates in the weekend. There's a TV, so you watch Jeremy Vine. Or you don't get you on YouTube.
Rather, you didn't watch Jeremy Vine of all people, but there you go.
For example, and all the terrestrial channels, but they don't have internet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there is some humanity in there because.
Yeah.
And is there any sense that when you're in prison? I mean, I don't want to divert from the case, but is there any sense that they're playing with your mind? That you're going there to serve the time for, in your case, a crime you didn't commit. But even if you had committed it, you're serving that time. And then once you've done that, it's like, okay, you've done it. You're a free man. You've been a bad boy. We slapped you on the wrist. We've locked you up. Is there a sense, though, that there is a different agenda?
I think the idea with sex allegations for the last 25 years, since Tony Blair came along, just to grandstand a little bit for you, is the sort of, if this happens to you, your future is gone and over. And they don't like you talking, they don't like you speaking, they can't always put conditions on, but for some people, if they break them, then, there's back to prison, all kinds of things. Because the prison service and the Ministry of Justice more generally is terrified of transparency. And I know you're very into expository of the human condition.
Yes.
And as I am, but the justice system isn't, because it's a bit of a racket, and it depends on people not knowing what these places are like inside and all the rest of it.
And I guess there's a certain amount of fear for to if you've never been, the fear of going there. I mean, I guess it is a deterrent at the end of the day.
Sure thing, sure.
But at the same time, some people, once they've become institutionalised, if they've done lots of it, they may find it difficult back in society.
Well, and we keep seeing awful stories about that.
Yes.
And then the tabloids overreact. I'm not going to say overreact in a mean way, but in the sense that they take one story and they pretend that everyone's like that.
Yes.
And the fact is that they're very unusual, and it's usually nutters and stuff. I mean, everyone gets painted as this.
Yes.
And it's just really not the case inside.
Not true at all. So I think we'll just do a little bit more strolling. I want to just mention that you met Clive Freeman at the same time, which both innocent people, both serving time, and I guess there were other people, of course, that you met who were also innocent. There must be an affinity there, that you're all, you're not completely on your own. It's just, I'm the only one here who's innocent. Everybody else is, guilty of something or other. So we'll get into that, but we'll have a little stroll. Let me just go and grab the camera.
Yeah.
I hope the audience don't mind the nature of today's slightly relaxed, because I did think we could have done this in the studio, but it could get quite heavy and stale, whereas it's quite nice. And also, in a sense, there's an element of freedom in this.
Oh, there's absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very nice weather.
And it might be a bit windy on the microphone, so I apologise for that. So what was Clive like?
I actually met Clive in open prison after 2.5 years there at Dartmoor. Went to open up in Gloucestershire, and met Clive in a prefab rooms block that they have there. So it's basically lots of sort of prefab stuck on top of each other, and met him in one of those. there's an assumption these days when somebody's over 60 that they're inside as some sort of historical sex offender.
Right.
And poor old Clive was put under that kind of thing, and he's like, don't they know who I am? And he's got this South African accent.
Yes.
And he's like, he's the most famous prisoner maintaining innocence in Britain, basically. I don't mind calling him that. And the fact is that other prisoners don't care about that. They just see an old man.
Yes.
Who's very, very passionate about his own case for very good reason.
Oh, absolutely.
And
why wouldn't you be?
Well, totally. And a couple of he would go on at length about the problems with his case. And the good thing about talking to him is that he goes into the history of Zimbabwe and Rhodesia, as it was, and all the rest of it there, and you kind of get sucked into this safari world of there.
Right.
What was going on. So that was really interesting.
Yes.
And he was obsessed with botany. He said, "What do you mean you can't understand what that is? Are you fucking English or something, Sean?" And I'm like, "Sorry, I just don't know what every flower's called, you know."
Yes.
So that was his kind of take on things.
Yes. So you got on okay, because I know he was quite solitary.
We seem to keep getting put next to each other, and well, that just happens in there. And he would have a habit of kind of leaving on his bathroom lights in these pods, which are balsa wood basically. They're very thin,
Yes.
and the fan would keep going. And I'd say, like, "Clive, can you turn that off? It's really noisy." And he's like, "I was only gone for 10 minutes." And so he actually kind of remembered that after he met Dr. Norton recently.
Oh, yes.
Remembered that. He didn't realise that I was working with him. Because I said, "I'm going to try to do my best to talk about your case when I'm out, Clive, don't worry."
Yes.
But I think he's heard that quite a lot over the years.
Oh, yes, of course. And a lot of people, once they're out, probably so busy with what life now offers them and the difficulties they have, they probably forget a bit.
Yeah, they scurry off.
Yes. So okay, let's go back to you then. So you served your time, and at some point, of course, these 4 years are up, and you're out. And then what happens to you? You're on probation then.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Which presumably means going to an office regularly and saying, "Hello, I'm still here. I haven't absconded," and all of those things.
That's exactly it. You come out and you're kind of automatically high risk. Everybody is when they come out of prison.
Oh, right.
To check them. And then after 6 months, if everything's okay, then you go down and I'm like, "Well, I'm innocent anyway, everything's going to be fine."
Yes.
Anyway, but that's not how they see it.
No.
They've got a different risk criteria, which
Right.
they
Yes.
apply to everybody.
And I suppose from one perspective, I mean, the people inside the prison, the warders and those people who are checking on you, they may not, I suppose they have to know your case to a degree, but they weren't there at the trial. They didn't necessarily hear all the evidence. So as far as they're concerned, I suppose they think, well, the system has found you guilty, even though you say you're not.
Yeah.
And they've got to treat you that way, which is a bummer for you.
That's their constant line.
But that, yeah.
You've been found guilty in a court of law, whatever you say.
Yes.
You're a lovely bloke, Sean, but
yeah.
then that's pretty much
And
all the way through.
and that, I guess that must play on your mind.
Well, it's infuriating.
Yes.
For a while, but then that's when you decide all those old distractions are now gone, which do include alcohol, I don't deny,
Right.
which is now not a part of my life.
Yes.
To that extent.
Oh, good for you.
And various things that were expensive. And the good thing about the restriction of prison is that you become disciplined.
Right.
And so all those kind of discipline.
Yeah.
And I still get up at 6 a.m, not because I'm some 6 a.m. nutter, it's just that I quite like getting up at 6 a.m.
Well,
you know.
I mean, I love that early morning time myself. I
Yeah.
think it's a lovely time, especially in the summer when it's light. Perhaps in the winter it's not quite so fun, but it's quiet and you can think. And if you're a writer, I mean, when I was writing stuff, I found that the best time because I'd woken up and I was more inspired. So 6:30 in the morning to me is not so much a problem. So where are you now then? Because I know that obviously you're not just going to say, well, okay, that was it, 4 years, and now I've got to just wait the probation time, and then I go back to being technically a free man. But you know, this shouldn't have happened. And as you say, it was life changing.
Yeah.
So what are you doing at the moment?
As I was in Dartmoor there, I contacted Dr. Michael Norton, who has been on your show before.
Yes,
And
very lovely man.
He's at University of Bristol, and then afterwards I got out and said, "Hey, Michael, did you get that letter?" No.
Oh.
2 letters.
Right.
No, and the fact is prison communications are dire. So, and so anyway, so I introduced myself. He's a fascinating case, Sean. And then we discovered we have a shared love of art and music, and just became great pals.
Oh, brilliant.
And he asked me to become editor of False Allegations Watch because he noticed that I enjoyed writing. I'm a writer. And so I'm now editor of False Allegations Watch, part of his Empowering the Innocent organisation there. And so I'm very closely affiliated with University of Bristol. And we're working on loads of projects all the time. And kind of Clive's case with the CCRC Watch.
Yes.
We keep pursuing that. Mr. Jeremy Bamber is a part of the stable. And one that's very close to me is Mr. John Lee Osborne, who was sent away for 18 years for rape. But it's a deceit arrangement. And the Law Commission, the Criminal Law Reform Network, are trying to introduce now the crime of deceit sex. So basically, if we meet in a bar and I say I'm a bricklayer, the next day you discover I'm a barrister, then you could accuse me of rape and take me to court.
Oh, right, gosh.
That's a very simplistic way of how deceit sex might work. John Lee Osborne was convicted of that 4 years ago, a version of that by his ex.
Right.
So does this law exist or not? And they're trying to put in lots of things at the moment, like the juryless trials.
Right. That's madness.
That's the Law Commission in England and Wales. They're trying to see, doing a consultation on the false allegations movement. We're all saying this is madness.
Yes.
And they're trying to have the judges, the remaining judges, enact the decisions based on rape myths, which are theoretical. All the rape myths are very, very theoretical, and you don't have to be a men's rights activist to point this out. You just have to. Any human situation, like you mentioned earlier, is a human situation, but they're pretending it's a rape myth.
Let's go and perch down here. I'm going to try and put the camera in a place.
Beautiful.
So you're appealing
Yeah.
to your conviction, and that must be a tricky process in and of itself.
It's a long process.
Let's sit on one of these benches here, and I'm going to attempt now to put the camera on the floor and look at us, which may or may not work. But bear with us, ladies and gentlemen, as we do this and straighten up the camera. And there we go. Kind of works. So yes, so the appeal, that's I mean it's kind of going over. Is that going over old ground? And well, you tell me, because I have no idea really.
I actually appealed once from Dartmoor in handwriting, basically. If you apply after 1 month, you're out of time. So I checked.
So you've got to do it within a month?
Yes, within a month of getting there. Absolutely messed up. And
Yeah.
So
not thinking straight.
I didn't succeed in that. I did it 6 months later, and they said it's fine, out of time's fine. A bunch of handwritten issues, which I've kind of gone into a little bit, and some more.
Yes.
And they came back, the appeal court came back saying, irrelevant, no, this... I said the fact that I didn't give evidence because of my stammer. The appeal judge said that doesn't have any kind of bearing on the conviction, and like the fact that I didn't even... So just that, but there's many of them.
Yes.
Now I'm out, I'm working with the falsely accused support organisation, FASO, who are quite big, in doing another appeal, and they're helping me. It's been a year, but we're putting it together professionally, properly, not just written from a cell with my handwriting.
And if you weren't, I mean, your conviction period, although you're out now, runs out in 2 or 3 years' time?
Yeah, in 2026.
In 2026. But you want to clear your name, because what does it mean to you now that you're out? I mean, how does it affect you, having been inside, especially for a crime you didn't commit, in terms of work-life balance and all of that? Well,
one little anecdote from this, which I guess is that I was offered a job as an editor, as an official editor for a normal kind of magazine. And it's not easy to get that in any context. And I was offered the job, and then you don't have to disclose kind of unless you're asked.
Right.
So I didn't disclose about what had happened because I wasn't asked. And then the probation said, you have to disclose. And I said, but there's no guidelines. So we had a bit of a row about it. I said, fine, I'm disclosing. And I told them, and they said, well, all right, we're going to take away the offer then. And I didn't get that job, which is an official, proper
Yes.
Not that the job I'm doing now is a proper editor's job, but this is a paid full-time, something not to do with justice reform, basically.
Right.
Took it away. So that was...
So unless you are able to stand on your own 2 feet and, you know, perhaps set up your own business or something like that, or you've got other organisations that are on your side because you're an ex-prisoner, whether you're innocent or guilty, but you're an ex-prisoner, you are stuck.
Yes, you are, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a part of the thing that the people who have orchestrated all this, who are basically power feminists, without wanting to demonise any group, but I'm having done lots of research, is that basically it's a way of getting kind of rid of certain men out of society, insufficiently risk-averse men, I refer to them. Right. And to have them replaced with people identifying as feminists, as Dr. Michael Norton refers to them. So, and it's like a in-out situation. And that's how they get to a point of sort of cultural dominance. Yes. In this way.
And that seems to be something that, as you've just explained, something that's sort of coming in, a change in culture, which is extremely worrying for anybody, really. I said at the very beginning, the system seems to be wrong. I mean, the whole system is corrupt, really, because we live in a society that's always after you. It's always trying to entrap you, ensnare you. They're corporations, they're there to have a profit. Obviously, you're at a criminal court, not a civil court, so it's a different thing. Going back to the trial, you had a jury. Do you feel that they got the sense of the case correct?
I can't remember if I sort of said before the actual kind of makeup of the jury. Did I mention that?
No.
Oh, it's 9 women.
Oh yes, you said 9 women, that's right.
3 men. So you're already in a slightly skewed position.
Right.
And the thing is that you don't know in the jury room what's being talked about. They don't have to disclose the reasons that they came to it. And I don't know about, well, I do know from watching your work is that I'm very sceptical of groupthink.
Right.
And if you've got one person in there, boy or girl, sort of thinking, by the way, these days that person's shut down so quickly, even outside of a jury room.
Yes.
Obviously that place is a serious place. They realise that. They'll be like, well, he didn't speak, so he's guilty.
What do you think then is the answer? You've gone through the mill. Your life has changed. It's been dreadful. You're an innocent man, and now you're almost at the end of the sentence, but you're doing your appeal, which hopefully will go through and quash the whole thing and compensation and what have you. But what do you think could be done better or should be done, or is the answer to all of this?
Unfortunately, I think it's about power. And so what I would say as a human person is that we need conflict resolution for a situation where if a boyfriend is upset by a one-night stand with 2 drunk people, then let's sit around a table and talk about that. And if you need counselling, if either of them need counselling, have that on the state, something like that. Not put someone away for £45,000 a year on average for 4.5 years.
That's what it's costing the taxpayer.
That's what it costs on average, not every prison, but yeah, exactly. It should be handled with conflict resolution, and that's what we're working towards. All the stuff we have to go through on the way will be slagged off a lot, and people will call us men's rights activists. You know, Andrew Tate, I have nothing against the man personally. He's a Luton man. Yes, I do.
I'm only vaguely aware of him, so I'm not too familiar with his work.
Right, controversial and has just been charged with rape and child trafficking in Romania. You know, lots of your viewers will.
And my viewers are more intelligent than I am, so they'll know.
He's he's very, very influential over young men, as he constantly reminds people, because he's very much an alpha man there.
Yes.
You don't have to be that just to stand up for yourself.
No.
But he does all this assertion. And, he's being cancelled by the law in kind of Romania, and all of the power feminists out there will be saying, I told you so. The fact is, I'm on the bench about it, as everybody else would be. But it's about power. It should be about conflict resolution. And there's lots of people making money out of it, of course. The lawyers never lose.
No, the lawyers never lose. So I'm just going to wrap this up. In fact, we'll just walk back down to where we started. Sorry about this, viewers. I mean, it just saves me holding the camera, really. And I need to just keep making sure that actually we are recording, which we are. So to wrap this up, and I suppose I ought to say, just past all these lovely squirrels, this gentleman is nurturing. I think we have to go that way, don't we? I suppose I just have to say that I will be aware that there may well be members of the audience who perhaps are not even listening to your story, or just say, well, how do we know he's innocent? How do we know? We've only got his word for it. You know, what about the other party? We've not heard from her. And of course, I don't know who she is, and it's none of my business really, because I'm taking the interview with just you. And so all I can say to that is that we have to take your side of things and explore that. And even if let's say, just for example, it was all a pack of lies, and I'm not saying it is, but I'm just saying, if still the notion that you've put forward of conflict resolution sounds like a sensible thing. And clearly, you know, if it's rape, then it's rape, and if that's what it is, then that's a completely different thing. But you can't just start shoving people in because it's a policy.
Right. Well, that's what they've done to rape now, is to have lots of different levels of it. So if you say she's drunk and you're drunk, she can't consent, so you're going to prison, then by that account, me and a million other men in Britain are that.
Yes.
But the prisons don't have a million people in them. We can't do that.
No, quite.
So some people would prefer it that way, and that's what they're trying to push towards. So they've actually turned around what that thing is. It's Dwayne Cousins, the police guy. It's a dreadful thing.
Yes.
You know, almost every sane person thinks it's a dreadful thing.
Yes.
But that somehow gets extrapolated right down every man. You're like, well, nothing to do with me. You know, but people pretend it somehow is.
No. Well, I mean, it just sounds like a very bleak situation. And as I said right at the beginning, this is something, unfortunately, that could happen to anybody. You know, you're having a consensual moment between the two, and for whatever reason, somebody's decided to make an allegation, and that perhaps, rightly or wrongly, that then changes your complete life.
Yes.
You know, if the allegation is 100% correct, then that's different. But if that allegation is made for completely spurious reasons, for whatever it is, and then that changes your life, that's just extremely miserable.
It's a thing that was very much happening at that time. It's hard to track in False Allegations Watch if that's still as it was, because all of the conviction rates, the targets and things are kind of, depending on who reads them, they all sort of change about.
Yes.
People say there's not enough conviction rates. Well, there actually are, because 65% of them are found guilty.
Yes.
So, but they have to get through certain barriers. But they're trying to take away checking of phones. So basically, they don't want any evidence to be checked, to just have people put away.
Gosh.
Which is just going to, it's a democratization of sexual assault, is what I call it, because it's just applying left, right and centre, depending on the severity of how they see it.
Do you think, because we mentioned just before we got going about tags and things like that, we'll end up looking at the sea just to give people a nice little finishing shot. Do you think that the prison sentence for what happened, and I know you're innocent, but do you think there are other methods that could be done to help what is it? What do you call it when you put people back into society? Not regenerate, but
rehabilitate.
Rehabilitate. That's it. You can tell I'm not really a journalist. Only sort of feeling my way around this. Tags, is that something that could be a useful tool?
Well, if people who aren't actually a risk are going to be put sort of through this,
yes,
and they're having to be checked left, right, and centre, then if you must have something, then have a tag then, I suppose. I mean, there's alcohol tags on the wrist, on the ankle, which I guess if a person does have that kind of alcohol use, which is a problem to them and they acknowledge it, then it's probably quite a good thing.
So that senses if you're drinking alcohol, or knows when you're going into a pub or something like that?
Yeah, it's a sense if you drink alcohol, yeah.
Right.
And apparently in South Wales it's been really successful, and the people using it have found it successful. So it looks encouraging as far as I can tell, according to Inside Time anyway. But I'd suggest that myself. Conflict resolution, that kind of thing. Unless we want to be a country that says no more sex.
Yes, yes.
And if it's slightly not entirely perfect because there's a complaint afterwards from another party,
Yes.
what do you do about that? And what they're doing with that now is weaponising it.
Well, Sean, I really appreciate you talking to me today, and I hope it's been an interesting experience. It's been interesting walking around doing this in the open. I wish you very well with the case and the appeal that you're going through, and also all those other people who may be in that position that you were started in that position right at the beginning, where they've suddenly been told, actually, that night you didn't treat me very badly and I might make a complaint about it. I mean, there must be a lot of people, male or female, who are in that predicament at this moment, thinking, my life is about to change.
Well, there's a lot of people who are not just the accused, but the mothers of the accused, we call them.
Yes.
And they are the biggest part of the falsely accused movement. And that's what's going to change policy. 80% of the people supporting me and supporting everything else are the mothers, the wives, sisters of boys and men who've gone through this.
Yes.
And that's actually who I'm writing for and editing for, those people.
Because there's a lot of character assassination in there. I mean, I didn't mention it. It just suddenly occurred to me that when you're in the court, there must be people who say, well, Sean wouldn't do like this. Sean's not this sort of person. Does that count for anything?
What they do is to create a bad character reference in court. So there's no evidence. They get a bunch of witnesses who
Right.
might possibly have come to drunk at your bar and who didn't like you very much for whatever other reason.
So it's all spurious.
It's all entirely spurious.
Yes.
And you can create a case like that.
Gosh.
And these days. And that's what all these little things they're trying to finagle through in the Law Commission and everything are about. And that's why we kind of everyone says, what are you so animated about it?
Yes.
Well, it's to make sure that we protect a bit of British
Yes.
law.
Yes.
You know.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. As I said at the beginning, we all know that the law system in all sorts of different ways is broken, and we need a new system. And the new society that we're building, hopefully that we're building and turning our backs on all of this nonsense that's happened, will reflect some of this. So thank you so much, Sean, for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to put a link in the description to
my book, or
your book,
my,
yeah,
yes, and also to my story. But people can get to the guts of it if they want.
Yes,
just underneath. Yeah.
So do check that out as well.
CRT Watch.
It's a little bit windy. I hope that's not blasting on the microphone. So I will say thank you for watching. I will be back with more interviews, probably in the studio. But I'd like to do more of these walking and talks because it's nice just to be out in the fresh air. But until next time, Sean, thank you so much, and I will see you again in the future. Until then, bye bye.